On the 3rd of May 2025, Logan Federico's life was brutally taken in a senseless act of violence. But what if I told you this wasn't just about one victim? What if the true horror lies in the system, the very system that allowed her killer to strike again and again? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling truth behind Logan's death and the justice system's failure to protect her. The answer may not be what you think. The truth is darker than anyone realized. Before I begin, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I'd love to know just how far this story is reaching. Logan Federico was a 22-year-old aspiring teacher, someone whose heart was as big as her dreams. She had a passion for helping others, a gift for making every classroom feel like home, for inspiring young minds to reach for something greater, something better. Her smile could light up a room. But on that fateful day in May, Logan became just another victim in a tragedy that would expose the deep cracks in the system, with her potential stolen, her future cut short. The world will never know the impact she could have had. Logan's story, though, wasn't just one of promise and loss. Her death was only the beginning of a much darker tale, a tale that extends beyond her touching lives of others who have been forgotten. Logan's friends remember her as someone who always took time to listen, who cared deeply for everyone she met. Her students, who she taught at the local school, said she was more than just a teacher. She was a friend, a mentor, a guiding hand. She believed in every single one of them, those kids who needed someone to believe in them. She was their cheerleader, their safe space. Her compassion knew no bounds. And yet, her life was stolen in an instant, snatched away by a killer, with no remorse, no hesitation. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time a life had been ruined. It wasn't even close. We'll get to that. But first, let's dive deeper into who Logan was, who she could have become, had fate not been so cruel. Logan was the youngest of 3 siblings, raised in a small but loving family. Her father, a proud man with an ironclad sense of justice, worked as a mechanic. Her mother, an elementary school counselor, had the same nurturing spirit as Logan. They were close. Their home was filled with laughter, love, and the comforting smell of home-cooked meals. Logan's dream was to make a difference. She wasn't just looking to teach, she was looking to inspire, to shape the future one student at a time. Her graduation day, the proud moment when she received her degree, was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. The next chapter of her life, filled with hope and possibility. But just days after that promise, everything changed. Everything she'd worked for, everything she believed in, vanished in a single night. The 3rd of May 2025 was supposed to be an ordinary day, a day filled with the joy of reconnecting with old friends. Logan had traveled to Colombia to visit her best friend. She was looking forward to a weekend away from the pressures of work, to relax and unwind, to take a breath. Little did she know that this would be the day her life would be ripped away, without reason, without warning. Logan wasn't just the latest victim of a senseless crime, she was the first in a much bigger, more terrifying story. You think you know the story, but the truth? It's far darker than you ever imagined. Before we dive deeper into this case, I want to take a moment to thank all my amazing subscribers for supporting the channel and helping it grow. Your support keeps us going, and I'm truly grateful. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. Every bit of support helps bring more true crime stories like this to life. Share this video with someone who loves a good mystery, and let's keep this conversation going. Turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we post the next shocking case. It was early in the morning on the 3rd of May 2025, still dark, The world around Logan Federico was quiet, peaceful. A day that was supposed to be filled with joy turned into something no one could have anticipated. And then, the darkness broke. Alexander Dickey, a man whose history was soaked in violence, broke into the home of Logan's close friend. He wasn't looking for anything of value. No, he wanted something far more devastating, something that would change everything. He wanted to steal her future. He took everything in an instant: her life, her future, her family's peace of mind. But what happened that night, the moment she faced her killer, will haunt everyone who hears it. The early morning silence shattered by the sounds of breaking glass. Dickey had entered through a window, a quick and efficient method of intrusion. There was no struggle, no signs of an immediate confrontation. Logan was asleep in a quiet bedroom, unaware of the horror inching closer to her. The warm glow from a nearby lamp bathed the room in a soft light, a sharp contrast to the nightmare that was about to unfold. It wasn't until Dickey stood over her, waking her from her sleep, that Logan realized the horror she was facing. She was alone. Her friend was in another room, unaware of the nightmare unfolding just feet away. Dickey didn't hesitate. There was no mercy in his eyes, no second thoughts. He had come with a purpose. But what happened next is something Logan's father would never forget. According to Logan's father, Steve Federico, in a heart-wrenching testimony, Logan was forced to her knees. Her hands were held over her head, a final desperate attempt to shield herself from what was about to come. She was pleading, not for her life, but for him to stop, her voice breaking in the stillness of the room. Her father later testified that she begged him to stop, to spare her. And yet, the killer's response was swift and cold. He didn't flinch. He didn't waver. Logan's last moments, her final breath taken by a man who felt no remorse, no hesitation. And just like that, Logan was gone. But Dickey, he wasn't finished. The night wasn't over yet. The sound of the gunshot echoed in that small room, a sound that would forever haunt those who heard it. But Dickey didn't flee immediately. No, he stayed there, his mission not complete. At some point, he left Logan's friend's home, leaving behind not just a body, but a broken future. The police arrived to find the scene just as Logan's father described it, a room filled with the remnants of a life taken too soon. But for the authorities, this was just another crime to investigate. The investigation began in typical fashion. Evidence was collected, witnesses questioned, and the case was passed through the gears of the justice system. But the truth, the deeper story behind this tragedy, was still to be uncovered. But the real story begins when we dig deeper into Dickey's twisted past. His criminal history wasn't just a list of names and dates. It was a roadmap, a chilling blueprint that would show how the justice system had failed again. What do you think? How could Logan's killer have been stopped earlier? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read and reply to every comment, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you think. Alexander Dickey was 30 years old when he took Logan Federico's life, but his story didn't begin on that fateful May morning. No, Dickey's past was littered with violence, arrests, and a long string of failed opportunities for justice. He had been arrested 39 times, each one adding to a long list of crimes, from theft to assault, from violence to destruction. And yet, despite his extensive criminal history, he was free. He was allowed to walk the streets, a ticking time bomb. Dickey faced 25 felony charges before Logan's murder charges that should have kept him behind bars, but instead, he was granted second chances, third chances, and then more chances. How was this possible? How did a man like Dickey, with such a violent past, continue to slip through the cracks of a broken justice system? But what if there was something even darker behind his actions? Something more than just a criminal's pattern of violence? To understand Dickey's actions, we have to understand him. We have to ask, what drives a man like this? Is it a broken system that failed him at every turn? Or is there something more sinister at play? Something deeper? What was it that turned a man like Dickey into a cold-blooded killer? Was it the failures of the justice system, repeatedly allowing him to return to society without consequence? Or was it something inside him, something darker, more twisted, an emptiness that no law could ever fix? Whatever it wasn't just a random act of violence. No, Dickey's violence was not just a series of outbursts. It was a pattern, a methodical destruction of everyone he touched. But what led to Logan's death? What made her the next name on Dickey's list of victims? By the time he met Logan, Dickey had already established a disturbing reputation. He wasn't a stranger to violence. He was a predator, moving through life with the sole purpose of taking what he wanted. Logan wasn't the first victim in his path, and sadly, she wouldn't be the last. He had already left behind a trail of broken lives, lives that never had the chance to heal, lives that had been ravaged by the same monster who would end Logan's. Every time he was arrested, he was given another chance. Every time he was released, he slipped deeper into the shadows, where his true nature could thrive. And yet, after all the damage, after everything he had done, he was still free. But what happened when Logan's name crossed his path? Logan wasn't just another victim for Dickey. She wasn't just another name in a long list of crimes. No, for Dickey, she was an opportunity. An opportunity to take something from someone else, to steal something pure and bright, something that would leave the world darker for having lost it. He had no remorse, no hesitation. He saw her not as a person. He saw her as an object, something to be taken, to be destroyed. And when he did it, when he took Logan's life, it wasn't just about her. It was about everything he had done, everything he had failed to do before. Logan was just another casualty in a life built on chaos and pain. But Dickey wasn't finished. No, this was just the beginning. The truth behind Logan's murder was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Do you think Dickey's violent past should have kept him locked up long before Logan's tragic death? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I always read and reply to every comment, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, where are you tuning in from today? Logan wasn't Dickey's first victim. His rampage had spanned over a decade, leaving behind a trail of suffering, broken lives, and shattered families. Each time he was allowed to slip away, each time he was given a second chance, the consequences became more dire. But the stories of those who suffered before Logan, the stories of those whose lives Dickey had destroyed, are rarely told. Before Logan, there were others who never had the chance to fight back, others whose voices were silenced long before Dickey's final act. But what happened to those before her? What were the untold stories of the victims who didn't make the headlines? In 2012, there was the case of Jessica Mills, a 5-year-old woman who had gone missing for 2 days before her body was found in a wooded area outside of Columbia. Her death was ruled as a homicide, but the case went cold, no leads, no suspects. It wasn't until years later that investigators realized a pattern in her death, a connection to Dickey. But by then, Jessica's family had already buried their daughter, never knowing the truth behind her murder. Jessica Mills wasn't the only one. The bodies began to pile up, each one a silent cry for justice. Then came Michael Johnson, a 2-year-old father of 2. He had been in and out of trouble with the law, but there was no reason to believe he was anything but another statistic until his body was found in a dumpster behind a local convenience store. His face, once full of life, was now just another casualty. But the police had no solid leads, no clues. The case seemed like just another senseless killing, but in reality, it was one of Dickey's first. With each victim, Dickey's story grew darker. His pattern was beginning to emerge, silent, unseen, until it was too late. And then there was Karen Wallace. She was a mother, 41 years old, and worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Karen went missing one evening after her shift, and her body was discovered in a nearby alley. Her family believed she had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Karen's murder wasn't random. It was deliberate. She was another piece in a twisted puzzle, another life stolen with no warning, no mercy. Each death was more brutal, more heartless, and with each crime, Dickey was getting closer to his final victim. 3 years later, the name Sarah Crawford was added to the list. She was a 19-year-old college student, barely starting her life. Her body was found in an abandoned building, no signs of struggle, just another tragic death that the police couldn't explain. Sarah's story was almost forgotten, a life erased with no one the wiser. But now, looking back at these murders, looking at the pieces of Dickey's past, it's clear he had been active long before Logan's tragic fate. Sarah Crawford, Karen Wallace, Michael Johnson, Jessica Mills. They were the forgotten victims, the quiet casualties of a killer who hadn't yet shown his true face. Then, after Sarah, there was another, and another. The bodies piled up, one by one, all while Dickey remained elusive, his face buried in the anonymity of a system that failed to stop him. The connections between the deaths were too obvious to ignore, yet no one was looking in the right direction. The authorities, too blinded by their failure to act, missed the signs. The full scale of Dickey's actions was far greater than anyone could have imagined. He wasn't just a violent man. He was a predator, slipping between the cracks of a broken system. The question is, how many more were there? How many more lives had he stolen before he finally crossed paths with Logan Federico? Do you feel like the justice system gave Dickey too many chances? What could have been done to stop him sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read and reply to every comment. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Dickey's criminal history, he kept slipping through the cracks. Time and time again, he was allowed to walk free. The system that was meant to protect people like Logan, like the countless others before her, failed them. And it wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. Clerical errors, plea deals, and a broken system of communication. All these things allowed Dickey to stay on the streets, despite the glaring signs of his violent past. How could this happen? How many victims were there before Logan? The truth, buried in the system's failures, was not just a story of one man's violence. It was a story of a justice system that failed to protect the most vulnerable. Look at his criminal history. A man arrested 39 times, facing 25 felony charges before Logan's death. That alone should have been enough to keep him locked away. But no. Instead, he was let go. Time and time again. Each time, there was an excuse. He was granted bail, or the charges were dropped, or they couldn't find a way to prosecute him. The system, overwhelmed, failed to hold him accountable. His crimes should have been the red flags that stopped him before he ever reached Logan. But the system turned its back on him, again and again. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just that Dickey slipped through the cracks. There was something far darker at play here. Imagine this. Each time Dickey was arrested, his case was pushed to the back of the pile. Court dates were rescheduled, paperwork was misplaced, and vital information was ignored. And every time, his past crimes, each one worse than the last, were brushed aside as if they didn't matter. The people who had the power to stop him were too busy, too distracted by other cases, or maybe they just didn't care. And each time he was freed, more people paid the price. More families lost their loved ones. More pain was inflicted because the system couldn't handle someone like him. What would happen if we had a justice system that actually worked? What if Dickey had been stopped long before Logan? But there's more. Dickey's release wasn't just due to clerical oversight or bureaucratic failure. No, there was something deeper, more troubling at play. The real issue was not just inefficiency, it was negligence, a failure of leadership. Behind those failures were people, people who should have done their jobs but didn't. They failed to connect the dots. They failed to communicate with each other. Dickey's previous crimes were ignored by the courts, not because they couldn't be prosecuted, but because of a complete breakdown in the system. This wasn't just an accident. This was a system that repeatedly allowed a man with a history of violence to roam free, a system that cared more about paperwork than the lives of those it was meant to protect. Imagine if someone had paid attention. Imagine if someone had cared enough to connect the dots. Somewhere, someone should have noticed the pattern. Someone should have connected the dots between Dickey's many arrests, his growing list of violent offenses, and the mounting number of victims. But instead, he was given chance after chance. How many times did they look the other way? How many warnings were ignored before it was too late? It's not just that Dickey was a repeat offender. The truth is darker. He was allowed to continue because the system didn't have the will to stop him. And that is the real tragedy. So, the question remains, how many more victims were there before Logan? And what does this say about the justice system that let it happen? Because what we'll uncover next will reveal something far worse than just a broken system. How do you feel about the justice system's failures in Dickey's case? Do you think enough is being done to fix it? I read and reply to every comment, so share your opinions below. Logan's father, Steve Federico, was left shattered by his daughter's loss. He was a man who had raised his children with love and hope, only to watch everything he held dear ripped away in an instant. But what would most have considered an insurmountable grief became the fuel for a relentless fight for justice. Instead of surrendering to despair, Steve decided to take action. He knew he couldn't bring Logan back, but he also knew he had to make sure that no other family would have to endure what he had suffered. He became not just a father in mourning, but an advocate for change. Steve's pain would never disappear, but through that pain, he found his voice, a voice that would eventually demand something far greater than just justice for Logan. In the months following Logan's murder, Steve became a force, a tireless advocate, driven by one singular goal: to ensure Logan's death would not be in vain. He stood before legislative bodies, speaking of his daughter, of the system that had failed her, and of the need for change. His testimony was raw, filled with the anguish of a father who had lost his child to the failures of a broken justice system. His voice cracked in the hearings, his hands trembling as he spoke. He wasn't just telling the story of his loss, he was telling the story of every victim, every family destroyed by the same system that allowed Dickey to continue his reign of terror. But Steve didn't just speak, he acted. And what came next would leave a mark on the justice system forever. Steve's emotional testimony reverberated across the nation. His calls for reform were impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just his words, it was the way he carried himself in those hearings. He wasn't just fighting for Logan, he was fighting for every victim who had been forgotten, every life that had been taken without consequence. He introduced Logan's Law, a proposed reform that would close the gaps in the justice system, ensuring that people like Dickey would not slip through the cracks again. Logan's Law would mandate stricter sentencing for repeat offenders, improve communication between law enforcement agencies, and create a system that could track criminals with a history of violence, ensuring that no one would ever be put at risk the way Logan had been. And with every hearing, with every conversation about Logan's Law, Steve grew more resolute. But was the system ready to listen? Steve's fight was not an easy one. Every day, he faced resistance from those in power, those who had been complicit in allowing Dickey to remain free. He faced bureaucratic delays, political red tape, and the harsh reality that real change takes time. But Steve wouldn't back down. The pain of losing Logan had forged a fire in him that no amount of resistance could extinguish. He knew that the fight wasn't just for his daughter, it was for all the victims who had no one to speak for them. But as Steve pushed forward, the true weight of his efforts began to take its toll. His personal life, his health, and his very spirit began to fray under the constant strain. Still, he pressed on. Every time the weight of grief threatened to consume him, he found strength in the fight. In Logan's memory, in the hope that Logan's law would save someone else's daughter, someone else's son. Steve wasn't just battling for change, he was battling to keep his daughter's memory alive. He was fighting to ensure that her name would be synonymous with justice, that her death would mean something greater than just another headline. But even as Logan's law gained momentum, Steve couldn't shake the nagging thought, would it be enough? Could one law really fix the system that had failed Logan? And more importantly, what would it take to make sure her death wouldn't be forgotten? What do you think of Steve Federico's relentless fight for justice? Do you think Logan's law will make a difference? I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. I read and reply to every comment. Also, where are you watching from today? Logan's story sparked something that went beyond the walls of courtrooms or the confines of police stations. It sparked a national conversation, one that reached every corner of the country, touching the lives of families, activists, and ordinary citizens alike. It was a conversation about repeat offenders, about the failures of a justice system that allowed killers like Alexander Dickey to walk free time after time, despite an undeniable trail of violence. And it wasn't just Logan's death. It was every life that had been stolen in the shadows, every case that had slipped through the cracks because the system simply couldn't or wouldn't do its job. Every victim that came before Logan, every family that had suffered, became a part of this larger, much darker story. What does it say about our justice system when someone like Dickey, with a history as violent as his, can commit such atrocities and face no real consequences? How could it be that the system failed to see the pattern in his past? How many more victims had to fall before something was done? Logan wasn't just a victim of Dickey. She was the symbol of a much larger systemic issue. And the question is, what's going to happen next? The more people learned about Logan's case, the more they began to see the cracks in the system. Families, especially those who had lost someone to senseless violence, rallied behind Logan's memory, using her story as a rallying cry for reform. It wasn't just about a single killer anymore. It was about a justice system that repeatedly let people like him go free, people who had shown they were dangerous, people who had taken lives without a second thought. And now, with Logan's case, the country had finally started to listen. The national outcry was impossible to ignore, as protests erupted in cities from coast to coast, demanding that something be done. But even as the calls for change grew louder, there was one truth that remained uncomfortable. How deep did this failure run? Was it really just one bad apple? Or was the system broken in ways too vast to repair? As Logan's case spread across the news, people began asking themselves one simple question. What if this happened to me? What if this happened to my family? What would you do if you were in Steve Federico's shoes? What would you do if the justice system that you trusted failed to protect the ones you loved? Would you stand by and accept it? Or would you fight like Steve did, knowing that the fight for justice wasn't just for Logan, but for every person who had been let down by the same system? Because the reality is, if this can happen to Logan, it can happen to anyone. The movement that grew from Logan's tragic death wasn't just about reforming laws. It was about ensuring that no other family would have to face the same heartbreak, the same emptiness, knowing that the system had failed them. But the road to reform wouldn't be easy. No law could bring Logan back, and no protest could undo the pain that had already been done. But each step forward was a testament to Logan's memory, a memory that would not be erased. Logan's story. It didn't just shake the nation, it shook the very foundations of the justice system. But the question remains, can a broken system truly be fixed? And if it's not, what does that mean for the future? In a final act of defiance, Steve Federico's efforts led to the introduction of Logan's Law. This new proposed statute was born from the ashes of tragedy, designed to reform a broken justice system and prevent the kind of horror that claimed his daughter's life from ever happening again. Logan's death, while devastating, had ignited a fire in Steve that wouldn't be extinguished. His pain became a purpose. His fight for justice became a mission. Logan's Law was his way of ensuring that no other family would face the same heartbreak. But the question remained, would the law be enough to change a system so deeply flawed? Could one law truly protect future victims, or was it already too late? Logan's Law proposed a sweeping overhaul of the way the justice system handled repeat offenders. It sought to close the gaps that allowed violent criminals like Alexander Dickey to slip through the cracks time and time again. One of the key provisions of the law was mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders. Those with a proven history of violent crime, like Dickey, would no longer be able to exploit legal loopholes or plea deals to shorten their sentences. Another provision aimed to streamline communication between jurisdictions, ensuring that criminals like Dickey, who had been arrested in multiple states, wouldn't be able to hide their past from new communities they entered. And perhaps the most important provision, the creation of a nationwide criminal tracking system for violent offenders, so that anyone, anywhere, could access real-time data on individuals with violent criminal histories. But even as Logan's Law gained momentum, something far darker began to emerge, something no one had anticipated. As Logan's Law was debated, it became clear that the law had the potential to change the landscape of justice. It was a step in the right direction, a critical first move toward holding repeat offenders accountable, ensuring the safety of communities, and protecting families from the devastation Logan's family had faced. Steve Federico was a man on a mission. His determination was unshakable. Every day, he fought with the same passion he had when he first spoke out for his daughter, because he knew, deep down, that this was his chance to do something that would matter. But even as Logan's Law began to take shape, there was an undercurrent of something far more sinister lurking in the background. Logan's Law may have been a victory, but it came at a cost. And what happened next? Well, it was something no one could have prepared for. As Logan's Law gathered support, a deeper issue came to light, an issue that spoke to the very heart of the justice system's failures. It wasn't just about fixing the system's failures, it was about confronting the uncomfortable truth that the system itself was built to fail, and no amount of reform could fix the root of the problem. The truth about how Dickey was able to continue his rampage despite the overwhelming evidence of his violent history was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. But the real twist was just beginning. Logan Federico's life was stolen, and her family was left to pick up the pieces. The promise of a bright future, the potential of a young woman on the cusp of making a difference, was ripped away in an instant. But Logan's father, Steve Federico, didn't let her death be in vain. Instead of drowning in grief, he took that pain and turned it into action. His fight for justice, his determination to make sure no other family would endure the same heartache, has given us all a chance to prevent this from happening again. Logan's story doesn't end with her death. It doesn't end with the tragedy that claimed her life. No, her story is just beginning. Through Steve's relentless advocacy, through his voice echoing in legislative halls and across media outlets, Logan's Law was born. A law designed to prevent the failures of the justice system that allowed her killer to slip through the cracks again and again. But Steve's fight is far from over. It's not just about reforming laws, it's about making sure Logan's death leads to a safer future for all of us. It's about creating a world where justice isn't just a concept, it's a reality. Logan's legacy can be the change we need, but only if we take action. Only if we stand together and demand the accountability her family deserves. Now, we have a choice. We can honor Logan's memory by supporting Logan's Law, By sharing this story, by raising our voices, and by ensuring that the broken parts of the justice system are fixed before it's too late for someone else, we can make sure Logan's legacy isn't just a tragic memory, it's a force for change, a force that ensures the system works for everyone, not just the ones who slip through the cracks. But the question remains, will we rise to the occasion? Will we honor her memory with the action that is so desperately needed? Logan's death was a devastating loss for her family, for her community, and for the world. But her father's tireless fight is a reminder that we don't have to let tragedy define us. We can choose to change the system, to fight for justice, and to demand the protection of every person, no matter their past, no matter their crime. So let us honor Logan not with silence, but with action, with the fight for a safer future for everyone, the fight for accountability, the fight for justice. Logan's story has already started a ripple. The question is, how far will it go? Will we let her legacy slip away, or will we ensure that every step forward is one in her name? Support Logan's Law. Share this story and demand accountability from the justice system. Let's make sure Logan's legacy leads to a safer future for all. What do you think could have been done to prevent this? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. Thank you to all my incredible subscribers for sticking with me through these tough but important stories. Your support means everything. If you found this case as eye-opening as I did, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who wants to hear solved cold cases like this. Don't forget to turn on that notification bell so you're the first to know whenever we drop a new video. And if you want to keep diving into more chilling cold cases like this, check out our previous videos on this channel. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.